This week at IT SPARC Cast, Zuck saves Meta megabucks, Windows market share just hit a blue screen, and China says Claude has a leaky backdoor.
Really?
Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's go see what's going on out there.
It's Monday, July 13th. IT SPARC Cast News Bytes is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now, the News Bytes. All right, so our first article comes from Reuters, and China has issued an alert over Anthropic's Claude. So first, China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, MIIT, which is one more I than MIT, issued a cybersecurity alert warning of an alleged backdoor risk in certain versions of Anthropic's Claude Code AI coding assistant. And then China's National Vulnerability Database claimed that the software contains built-in monitoring mechanisms that could transmit information such as users' identity and location to remote servers without explicit consent. The Chinese authorities then advised that users should update or uninstall affected versions of Claude code. So as you see, there's a relatively short article, so there's not a lot of information there, but I have a couple of thoughts, but I want to get your thoughts on this, Lou, before I do mine.
I mean, seriously, the nation Now, I'm not going to deny that the United States doesn't hack other people. Everybody hacks everybody. But holy crap, the nation whose security byline is we will hack you if we can and we don't care who you are,
right,
is upset about a backdoor. I guess they're only upset if it's not their backdoor.
Yeah, well, the other side of this is that we are in an arms race. So the Western world and China specifically are in a AI arms race where and the US is ahead by about 7 months. So as we start really seeing the newest version of open AI tools or Anthropic tools, which are generally staying fairly competitive, one might be better at one thing or the other, but they tend to leapfrog each other by little steps. And then 7 months later, those capabilities come out in an open sourced model from China. And the thing is that they want to catch up. In their mind, they need to catch up, just as in our minds, meaning the US overall, we need to stay ahead. And this has to do with security, like we talked about last week's CD of the week, where we saw the first agentic ransomware attack actually happen live. The arms race here is significant, and when you have state actors involved, it can get really ugly. And I think that I'm not saying that the backdoor doesn't exist or didn't exist, and we need to investigate and we need to figure that out and fix it. But I also think that this is a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's being thrown out there in order to try to maybe slow the roll that Claude is seeing right now, because they're really doing big, fast gains right now. And maybe that getting restrictions put on the company to slow their roll. Maybe that's what's going on here.
Well, we have seen state-sponsored or trace back to state money attacks on local data center builds and other things in the United States. We have a lot of Chinese money that's being used to astroturf those so-called grassroots movements. And so that's been a challenge as well. Plus, nobody has actually confirmed, other than the Chinese, that there's a backdoor. This could be telemetry, anti-abuse mechanisms. We don't know.
Yeah. All right, Lou, what's Meta doing with its old memory?
Meta is doing something really, really clever. So I'm going to tell you two things, right? One you're going to really like and one is going to annoy you. So let me get to the one you're going to think is kind of cool. Meta developed a custom Compute Express Link CXL ASIC called Vistara that allows it to reuse DDR4 memory from retired servers into a new DDR5 based AI servers. So this is not, by the way, entirely new. I saw memory cards. You probably see some if you go back to my Supercom last year reporting on a memory card that would allow you to add more memory to a server, something very much like it. But the approach addresses the mismatch in hardware life cycles, right? Because servers are typically retired after 3 to 5 years, given the increments of the thermal cycling and mostly the processor technology, but DRAM can last longer, 7 to 10 years. It's still within that band of being fast enough to get the workloads you need for your business done. So what the Vistara does is it bridges older DDR4 memory to modern processors over PCIe Gen 5 CXL 2.0. So it avoids the need to purchase not all, right? Expensive DDR5 memory. You're still going to boot on DDR5. So it's using custom RISC-V cores to manage the memory. So I would imagine, and I don't have a view of what's going on inside this chip yet, that it's probably writing to multiple banks of DDR4 at the same time. Think of it as striping, but for memory. You're going to be able to pull your access times very far up by doing something like this. It's deployed already across millions of meta servers, supports AI inference, databases, distributed caches, analytics, all the good stuff, right? And it's reduced the number of servers required for some AI inference workloads by 25%, which is significant lowering of infrastructure costs. So company built its own ASIC because existing commercial CXL memory expanders generally bundle memory with the controller, lack DDR4 support, consume more power, or are too expensive for hyperscale deployment. This one, I suspect, is a hyperscale deployment question. I have seen these things. Now, here's the thing that's going to make you grumpy. Sorry, got to say it. So I got to preface this by saying 2 family members I am very close to were with a CXL startup. So I know a lot more about what goes on in this protocol behind the scenes. There is no reason you can't do this with DDR3 memory. The reason you can't do this with DDR3 memory in your machines is your vendor does not support this in BIOS. If they added this into the BIOS, you would be able to take your DDR3 memory and recycle it in this same method, but they would like you to buy new memory. So this is really cool. You're running your own data center and you shouldn't have everything in the cloud. As we've talked about a number of times, cloud uptime is not that great. On the telecom scheme of things, you should have local servers. You should be looking for stuff like this. Yes, there are commercial solutions you can buy. Yes, you should be beating on your vendor to make sure that they're willing to open up that BIOS to get you that memory you need. Now, much more simple to do now, given the shortages. They want to sell you upgraded memory, but if they don't have the memory to sell you, hey, at least maybe they can sell you a card. John, what do you think about this?
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm thinking about back in December when we sent you out to supercomputing. I'll put a link to some of that right above Lou's head if you're watching us on YouTube. Right here, there was some great reporting that Lou did going around talking to all these different vendors. And I specifically remember the vendor that was talking about, repurposing memory. And at the time, memory prices and chip prices in general hadn't started to spike. They'd gone up, but they hadn't spiked the way they have now. And so seemed like a nice thing, but not as critical. I think that this is becoming critical. And I think we're going to see a lot more hyperscalers start looking at this as a way to not only just save money, but just to actually be able to roll out, because the price is one factor, but actually getting whatever it is that you're looking for, the memory or the GPUs, is really difficult. So this is a way to take the memory that you have right now that you would normally be recycling or throwing away or doing something else with, and use it. And then again, I think that you're right that they are doing some sort of RAID kind of striping that allows for faster throughput and hitting 2 chips at once, or 5 chips at once, or whoever knows what it is, in order to get performance at that DDR5 rate. So I think it's really cool.
I think it's really cool. And it's something also you should pay attention to because you're going to be doing local data center upgrades. And traditionally you roll the racks out, you roll the new racks in, you go. Right. That's the way the hyperscalers do it. Now that you're seeing stuff like this, it's something you should pay attention to. You should be asking your vendors about this. If you're in a situation where you have to do server upgrades on your data center, Do not let that memory out of your sight. You got DDR4, you're moving to DDR5. There are cards you can buy that can do this. You may not know that. CXL can do some even more wacky things. And if you want to keep an eye on this, obviously I'm deeply immersed in the technology because I have family conversations about it, but it has got some very, very cool, including mapping additional memory to GPUs, stuff like that. So keep an eye on Broadcom, keep an eye on Marvell, keep an eye on these companies that are working on this stuff because they will ultimately save you money and give you capability you couldn't have had, but you've got to know to ask because maybe the scrap out price of that DDR4 memory is worth a lot more than you think it is.
100%. 100%.
What about the desktop, dude?
Yeah, so this is an interesting article that came from linuxiac.com, and they are looking at StatCounter. And StatCounter has a bunch of different statistics, and one of the things that they track is desktop operating system via internet traffic. So they look at the agent in the browser saying, I'm running on Windows or Mac or Linux or whatever it might be. And then they report out on that and use that as a general guide of what percent of each operating system owns in the market. Now, what they're saying here is that Windows has dropped below 60% on the global desktop share for the first time. So, and it actually fell to 56.55% in June of 2026, where it had been over 60% the previous year. It says that Mac OS is roughly 16%. That includes Mac OS and OS X, the older version of Mac OS combined. And Linux climbed to about 4.3. That's a pretty big number for Linux because it just hasn't really had the marketing push, if nothing else. It's not the kind of thing that your mom's going to use or your non-tech friends are going to use. But so it is growing, and that's great. But I think that there's a little bit of odd numbers here. And if you look at the chart up there, I want to talk about that. And what I'll do is I'll try to make that chart a little bigger if you're watching on YouTube. But it's just really interesting because there's a good percentage, about 16%, that is unknown operating systems. And so what that means is that the operating system agent has been hidden and obscured through either the browser directly or through an extension that's been added to the browser. And I think that that's an interesting conversation that you and I should have, Lou, is what do we think that that's all about? I'll get your opinion first.
Well, I've been pondering this, right? So it falls into what I would call three buckets. Bucket number one is probably power users like us who don't want to report what their browser are doing, right? And we tend to be very much in the minority. I'm one of those weirdos who also has a Linux desktop as well. And, but this is, not everybody drives a Ferrari. Not everybody runs Linux. Run what you need to run to get your job done. Better is very subjective. The second thing is corporate policy. So the biggest Windows installations are in corporations, right? Microsoft has sort of captured the corporate market through their tools. And there's nothing wrong with that. Apple's making inroads, that's fine. But the market will sort it out. But there's a third aspect that you and I didn't discuss that I think is interesting. What if these unknowns, a big chunk of these unknowns, are Linux-based scrapers? They are the curl clients that are coming in, grabbing web data and pulling it in for AI.
I have been thinking about that it could be the AI agents that are out there scraping for learning purposes, and that might be what we're seeing here. That could be a significant impact. I would like to actually see a longer view of this, so a 5-year, 10-year view, and what does that other look like in that case? That would actually tell us a lot. If in just the last 3 or 4 years, that's jumped up dramatically, then it would give a good sign that it is AI. But that's interesting. I also think it'd be interesting to track this as a Mac user. And we didn't really talk about it on this broadcast because it wasn't as relative, but Apple increased the prices of their products Mac across the board pretty significantly just a few weeks ago. And I'm wondering what kind of impact that'll have next year at the same time. Will we see a drop in Mac, or will it continue to grow? Will people still be buying and paying the premium? The MacBook I'm running right here, I happened to buy just before the price increase, and it went up $1,200. So, and I might not have bought it at that point. That would have been, or I would have bought a lower model or something, because I got a pretty beefy system with a lot of storage. That's what I needed it for the podcast. But I'm really interested to see what'll happen on that one as well. So I got to say, take these numbers with a little bit of grain of salt. I think they're directionally correct, but I think that unknown still throws a little some questions in there. Yeah, but I think that we are seeing a decline in Windows, and I think that's an interesting world to be in.
What's impacting this? What could be impacting this trending data? I mean, my third point, I think, is probably having a large impact.
Yeah,
we're seeing
agreed.
wget and curl going out there for websites that don't have APIs that you can easily access the thing. That is obviously, we're going to see that, and I think we're going to continue to see that as people scrape. But I don't want to discount the MacBook Neo. They have had to double the production rate of that.
Yep.
And they were projecting 5 million. They thought this thing was going to be wildly successful and projected 5 million, and they had to double it.
Yeah. And the specs for the second model that's already started to leak, and that we expect to see that early next year sometime. But
and then
they also had to increase the price of that a little bit too. So it's still very attractive, but not quite as attractive as it was a few months ago.
And then what else happened, John? Windows 11.
Yeah.
Windows
and
11
the requirements for the TPU piece, that was a big driver. I think it may have had people look around. I'd be interested to see if iPad OS get added into this, because a lot of times iPads are your desktops. My mom doesn't have a computer anymore. She's got an iPad and she's got a phone, and that's it. I use my iPad probably more than I use my my laptops. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if that gets added into desktop.
We would be really interested if you have any insight to this one, because we're looking at this and we're seeing a whole bunch of factors moving. What are you seeing in your sector? Is Windows continuing to be the gold standard, or is the Windows 11 hardware requirements poisoned it in your organization? Now, I went and looked when I was researching this article, and they're saying that 70% of Windows installations are now up to Windows 11. I don't know if I believe that number because of the TPM. And we know that was mostly driven by the decreasing support. Now, Microsoft very quietly a couple of weeks ago added another year onto Windows 10 support.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to believe here. And obviously we're standing where we're standing. We do a lot of research as much as we can. You're in the thick of it. Are you seeing anything like this that could help explain this? We'd be very interested.
We would be. So send us some feedback. And speaking of feedback, before we wrap up, I wanted to read some listener feedback. And a longtime listener, Dennis, sent us a fairly snarky comment back regarding our article from last week, where we talked about Microsoft providing longer-term memory for agents and LLMs, which is something that's been a problem. And his response was, AWS has bedrock memory. It works quite well. I always just assumed that Microsoft was sending all of my diagnostic data directly to the NSA, so that it's refreshing that they've made a separate product to handle agentic. He made a bunch of other comments. I just thought I'd read that out. I'll put this up on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But we always appreciate feedback from everybody. Dennis is one of our more prolific people getting information back to us. So we do appreciate Dennis doing that. I also thought it'd be interesting to see that maybe we're going to see the birth of a new branch of IT out there that handles specifically around AI security. And I thought maybe you should call it AIIT, otherwise pronounced I. So, but that is going to cover this episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We would love to hear what you think. Do you have another topic you want us to cover? Do you think that maybe we got something wrong? Maybe the Anthropic issue is, maybe we glossed over that. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's real, and maybe it's scary. Or, do you agree with us that maybe, China's the government is really, trying to gain some foothold and using FUD as a way to do that. Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com or hit us up on X @ITSparkcast. If you're listening to us on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. We have been also seeing comments on LinkedIn as well, so you can hit us up
Thank you for
there.
that.
Thank you for that as well. But we do read every comment. We respond to most. And if it's particularly interesting or insightful, we will read it out on the broadcast. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss a single episode. And we will be back next week with more information from the world of enterprise IT. Take care.
Thanks for spending some time with us. We'll see you next week.